no passports, no custom lines, no Carlton lobby at 2 or 3 a.m., which is probably a good thing. We are here virtually to celebrate Cannes, an event that is dedicated to celebrating creative marketing and branded communication. And today, I am thrilled to have Alia Kemet be here and the star of the show as we get into our fireside chat. So Alia, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arvin. I'm so glad to be here to talk with you today.
Absolutely. For those of you who may not know Alia, I would love to share her background and bio with you, just so you know who she is. But Alia leads creative and digital strategy for McCormick and Company North America. Her multifaceted team is responsible for everything: digital strategy, content, creative campaigns, CRM, own platforms, social media, and emerging technology. This across all of McCormick's portfolio of brands. Alia notably has launched McCormick's first in-house creative agency known as McCormick Studios, and she's introduced a transformative approach to digital and creative development for McCormick. Now, some of you may have heard her name recently. She may be familiar as she was most recently the recipient of an Adweek Creator Visionary Award. She was noted as Brand Leader of the Year. So other luminaries include entertainer Travis Scott. Pinterest actually won for Creator Platform of the Year, and Janaya featured Cannes. So real great industry recognition of this talent. And prior to joining McCormick, Alia was actually part of many other brands, including IKEA, Whole Foods, BT.com, as well as Nike. So Alia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for that intro, Arvin.
Yeah. Well, for those, yesterday, 40 countries celebrated Father's Day, so a happy belated to everybody. Here in the United States, a very belated Juneteenth to everybody. Holiday 6 days old, but 156 years in the making. So we're all thrilled to embrace this as a country and to continue to be part of that. Alia, today we've got some time to take us through your thoughts. I wanted to start off with a couple of different pillars. First off, I wanted to hear from you as a leader, then wanted to get into some of the creative and digital marketing context so that we're talking about Cannes. And then lastly, I really want to touch upon this enterprise that you've created this year, which is your podcast. I wouldn't bring it up unless I thought and I knew that it was so incredibly dynamic and on point. So I'm really thrilled to kind of share more there. But Alia, unabashedly, you're a female Muslim mother of 4, women of color in leadership.
Sure.
You know, I wanted to hear from you, and I wanted you to share with the audience just your pearls of wisdom that you've got here. And, you know, we talked about this amidst a backdrop of social change and conversation. How invigorated are you? And at the same time, how tired are you? This is tough because there's so much happening, but please share more with us.
Yeah, so this is really not a new conversation for me. It's actually, what's new is that the world is talking about social change and that the world is kind of tuning in. It's funny, and I was in the chat with my family, the women in my family, we all have a chat all around the country. And my aunt, who lives in Houston, was saying how strange it was to her that everyone is celebrating Juneteenth, you know, as a Texan. Like, it just felt strange to her that the world is now recognizing and celebrating Juneteenth. And that, I really, like, that resonated with me. And kind of my response to her was, well, it's actually feels odd. It shouldn't, but it does feel odd that actually everyone is talking about diversity and inclusion and social injustice. So it's all of it at the same time, which is invigorating and exciting at the same time. As someone who's been having these conversations, you know, for 25 years, it is, you want to feel like, okay, this is not a fad. This is really a shift and change. And so it does feel a little odd and a little bit tiresome to show up every day, you know, but that's what we have to do, you know, willing to have those conversations. And you're like, are we just coming to this, you know? And the kind of last thing about it, Arvin, I'll say is, you know, people say, oh, well, how do you feel about race relations and that type of thing? And I think the conversation is about dismantling racism, not race relations. And so for me, it's like, how do we keep our eye on that more than anything?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think retreading that ground and just being honest with everybody. Some of these conversations that we have had and will continue to have, are awkward for many, but so necessary. Understanding people's point of view, their perspective, and situationally what it means in the context of just growing together socially, and even as we do work, it's just so critical. There are so many things that people see that affect their mood, their positive intelligence and emotional intelligence, et cetera. You touched upon this, where we've got so many companies now that are dedicated to expanding multicultural talent. How do you think about this in your personal life, and what advice may you have for others with regards to expanding your network and helping grow there?
Yeah, I think it's everybody's job. Like, it's something that we all have to do and be committed to. I try to lead by example with my team. And I try to really foster this environment where we can be we can be comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. It's almost like once you rip the Band-Aid off, right? And you have conversations with people that you might not normally have conversations with, it's like you can breathe easier. And so I really encourage that we're all people, and really kind of aligning ourselves and finding those points where we have so much in common, rather than the things that we don't have in common. It's pretty much what's been my philosophy. And then I really encourage, I have to tell the truth, I do push my team to have uncomfortable conversations. And maybe having a Black woman, leading at the helm, makes it easier for that to happen. But it's actually hard for me to do when so many people don't look exactly like me. And I'm like, let's have these conversations anyway. What I'm so excited about is we started having really hard conversations well before George Floyd was murdered. And so when that, happened, my social team, who is not a team of, a bunch of Black women, were so on it and prepared and thoughtful. And I really applaud them for that. And I think it's because we were not afraid to talk about things when it felt hard,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for many people who are joining today, I think that's something that is on their mind. It is actually reconciling the obligation that a brand might have.
Yeah.
You're managing a team and representing brands. And I think, where does your personal voice and opinion stop, and where does a brand's perspective start? Do you have any thoughts or any experience with that?
I do. It's really interesting because I don't know if I ever thought we would be in a moment like this where any and every conversation is on the table for brands, like literally. And so we're all kind of figuring it out as we go along. But I try to lean into this quote from, so there's a great playwright, August Wilson. He wrote Fences, and he wrote Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, that was really big this year. And one of the things he did was he always talked about having the hard conversations. And there's a quote, he says, "Your willingness to wrestle with your demons will cause your angels to sing." And I try to remember that, when it gets really tough, one, it's not about me, it's about humanity and looking at and really understanding culture. And I think brands have no choice now. We used to be able to say, well, this brand is a conservative brand. This brand is more of a liberal brand. So those brands that are more liberal, they talk about these things. If you're more of a conservative brand, or you're just not the kind of, that doesn't align, you don't have to get into those conversations. Humans, people, really younger people too, that are, going to shape, the direction of the world to come. That is their expectation, that we have the conversations, that we get into things that are not necessarily about a product, but are about how we treat each other. And so my philosophy and what I've pushed in the company is, let's wrestle with these things now so that, we can sing later. Let's have those conversations now, and let's get involved in the conversation that makes sense for us in the way that makes sense for our brand, right? And I think that's the tricky part that brands have to figure out. Don't show up in a way that is completely makes you look crazy, because your brand wouldn't talk that way. How would your brand talk?
And I think, what happens when a brand is going in a direction and taking a stand and it doesn't feel right? Did you pull back immediately? Are there any thoughts on just how to navigate some of that? It's hard to plan something that's unfolding in real time. And I think one of the things that you've noted is this idea that things are just simply grounded in human truths. Is that a moral compass that brands can use to kind of navigate this space?
I think so. And how does your brand intersect with the human truth? So, for instance, when I think about McCormick, if I know that the role of this brand is to show up for people and give them the confidence to cook at home and to make things taste amazing, then like that's the role of this is a brand that provides help and flavor and through inspiration and education, right? I know that. So then if something really if something happens in the world, for instance, we're having huge racial conversations, there's no way that is not impacted, right? We show up for people at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, at Hanukkah, at Eid, every single day of the year to get your kids out the door, what's going to go in their lunchbox. So we're a brand that is just connected to how you live your life every single day. I think that there are probably conversations that we don't need to, we need to be true to who we are as a brand, but that we're not going to be able to completely stay away from, because it's like, well, that's not an issue about product. Well, do our consumers care? I think is the question we should be asking ourselves. And how do we make sure that our brand identity shows up in a way that makes sense? Talking about how people eat from a diversity perspective, it's an easy thing for us to do, right? And how people come together around food, and we do that.
Yeah, that's great. At Pinterest, one of the things that I think is just critical for us as we kind of navigate focusing on diversity and inclusion within the company across, very broad spectrum beyond just simply race, but with identity, with different audiences. We want to have a company that's representative of our audience base. Yeah. And we want to ensure that the experience that people are having on the platform is actually buoyed by a workforce that mirrors that and can understand and relate. Do you have any thoughts on how change is gonna, in diversity, how do we actually, pay today and have dividends tomorrow in this? Are there any thoughts on how this is gonna just open up and continue to open up the industry?
Yeah, it's funny from a diversity perspective. When I think about like hiring, I think that's a critical part of it. How do we do it? And I think, especially for the conversation we're having today, when we're talking about creativity or Cannes, I think it makes sense to talk about like our industry. And we as a industry, or really in business in general, are very clear. Like no one will argue you that having diverse teams does not help revenue, and that you get more ideas. I mean, there's all kind of studies on that. But I think people should ask themselves, is it possible that some of that innovation is intrinsic in cultures, right? And so I'll give an example of that. When you think about like Black people are known for innovation, whether that is innovation in food, innovation in music, innovation in sports, innovation actually in science. Why would it be any different that they could not, or we could not excel in business? It should actually be an expectation. And so it's almost a surprise to me, not that every person should be innovative, but you see what I'm saying? But it's a bit of a surprise to me that Black people in particular are just so few in creatives in the industry. And if you guys can hear my cat, she's like completely screaming, I'm sorry. This is working from home. But anyway, yeah, so it's always interesting to me that is the case, that you have so few, and yet this is an area that Black people have excelled in many other industries. You would think in business, you would want to lean into that. So for me, companies are going to have to decide, like, what side of the history are you going to be on? Are you truly going to lean into this idea of what diversity means, or are you going to kind of tiptoe around it? And I don't think it's hard. I don't think it's a hard decision.
Yeah, and look, I love that. Like, in order to affect change, you have to actually be the change.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think this notion of leaning in, it's going to challenge how people have traditionally and classically thought about interviewing, about networking, about building up their company. And I think it's very freeing in many ways. It's tough because we're used to a mold and a model, that we're comfortable and confident in. But I also think it's just so critical and so necessary,
Yeah.
in order to.
One more build on that. You know how, like, I'll tell people all the time, I tell my social team, you should be following social channels that you would not, like, they're not who you are. You wouldn't necessarily follow those channels. You should be following people, influencers, so you can get different perspectives, right? Same thing. When you think about networking and getting to know people and how, because people say, oh, I don't know any diverse people, it's hard to attract them to my role. You should be connecting with people who don't necessarily look like you or do the same things that you do. And that's all of us, right? It just makes us so much better at what we do every day. So that's kind of how I think about it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And totally agree. You have to be there, prepared, leaned in to affect the change.
Yeah.
Whether the conversation is awkward, whether it's not how you did it before,
That's right.
it's about showing up. As noted earlier, I want to pivot more into that industry sphere of creative and digital marketing in the spirit of our Cannes conversation virtually. Wanted to just understand your assessment of the industry. Where does creative and digital marketing stand today? Are we elevating the experience? Is it tough? Please share your thoughts.
I think we're at this like really interesting inflection point. And I thought back like in my career to when I felt like we were at a point like that before. And I have to do it based on my kids, because like when I was pregnant with whom and what was happening. And so I know exactly when. And it was like 2007, 2008, right? That period of time where digital was just like coming online in such a new way. I mean, I remember I was, we're probably, I don't know if we're in the, I don't know, I might be older, but I'll say I remember when we were buying print, TV, and print meaning some newspaper, right? There was no social. I mean, FSIs were a big part of the conversation. I remember that point. And I remember being tasked with launching social media for IKEA at that time. And it being a very scary thing for people to do because it had not been done before. And big box retailers weren't doing this and we didn't know how, and you're figuring it all out. So that was when we look back now, we can see how pivotal of a moment that was and how those people who jumped into that moment, like their careers were changed forever. I know mine was, right? Who like totally embraced that moment. And so before COVID, I probably would have said the inflection point we were at right now was about e-commerce, right? Malls are dying. Like I literally tried to buy a gift for my husband. He likes Thomas Pink. I'm like trying to go at the last minute because this is how I operate. With my family. I'm at the last minute to get this Father's Day gift. All the stores I couldn't believe it. The stores were closed. I didn't realize all the stores had closed. So I couldn't drive to the store and get a product. So we know, but prior to COVID, like we were still having this conversation about how important e-commerce was. Today, that conversation is over, right? If you're not there, you're behind. So that's not the inflection point, but I think a year and a half it would have been, which is so interesting when you think about speed. Today, I really think that this inflection point is about culture and people and making sure that your brand is tapped in to like the emotional part of people's lives and culture, and using digital, e-commerce, all of these tools, all of these platforms to drive to what people want inside of those experiences. And that is it's a nuance, right? But I think like if you don't get that nuance, you're gonna be back talking about this transaction and that transaction, and like you're going to miss like the huge opportunity for trajectory that there probably is right now on the table.
Well, what's so interesting though is right now, I mean, we're talking about e-com. There's been just a rapid advancement. In 16 months, we've probably leapt 5 years ahead with regards to adoption, to the point, Alia, that you just said. The physical store is no longer open. It's not even an option. It may have closed. It may just not be open right now.
It wasn't open. I'm ordering my coffee to my house. I'm so embarrassed and so lazy, but
but it's, I think there's also a tension too, which is interesting, between e-com and media.
Yeah.
Right? Because e-com is like a product shot. And I think where you feel very strongly this has to go is that emotional part of culture.
Yeah.
And how do we bridge that too when it's a product shot today? Any thoughts on how you give voice to a brand and an experience when I think we're beholden to just some ways of doing things in 2021 so far?
Yeah. it's a lot easier, right? When you're talking about like a TVC or something that's like a big creative storytelling, you get down to a product shot, or, even, further down the funnel, and you're talking about like, shopper marketing, and our teams, we make all the content for product content on the digital shelf, as well as shopper marketing. So I'm very close to that. And this is what I'll say. There's a story in every piece of creative, right?
Yeah.
Some of the stories are really big and some of the stories are really small, and all of them need to be rooted inside of consumer insight. So something as simple as a product shot for cinnamon, right? Well, understanding what is the problem, what is the insight in there. When we know what it is, that when we know, because we've done the research and because we see what people are saying about our product, and they want to make sure that they understand how big are the holes in the top of the spice bottle, because then you don't trust yourself. Am I going to be able to pour it out quickly and ruin my meal because I put too much cinnamon in the pancake? You could actually never have too much cinnamon, by the way. But
cardamom or something else, right? Yeah.
You can't, or vanilla, and another tip,
yeah,
pumpkin spice too goes in pancakes. But anyway, so we know that is a question that people have. So then the story and the product shot is show that. How do you show that in a way that solves for the question and for the insight? I think what happens with product content is people just, sometimes you have to think, who are the people behind this work? Are they just taking a shot? Or are they taking a picture and making sure they're showing the front and the side and getting all of the info? Or are you solving for the question that someone might be having for their end result, which is to make a recipe or a dish? And in that, there's a story you can tell with a picture. And so I think it kind of goes back to human emotion and culture and understanding people, right. and making sure you translate that, through all your work.
Yeah, I mean, Pinterest is a visual discovery platform, and we're rooted in inspiration. So for Pinterest, whether it is trends in beauty or healthy lifestyles or sustainability, and certainly food, and sitting in the intersection of CPG, it's something that comes to life every single day. But what's so fascinating is, as a CPG manufacturer, not all of your products are direct to consumer.
Yeah.
So there's that intermediary, and I think we've been obsessed in a healthy way around creating a seamless user experience so that a brand can tell their authentic story, so that it's actually inspirational in the spirit of our platform, but it also drives that lower funnel and it drives that action. And it's very exciting, and we're doing a better job, and it's improving, but we continue to, I think, see a lot more potential for this. Alia, what's the formula for your brand team? You lead a team, you've got a portfolio that you manage. How has your leadership style, especially in the context of 2021 with everything going on, what's your mantra? How has it changed? What kind of wisdom can you share on that?
So I am the furthest thing from a micromanager. My team at IKEA used to say that I said this, and it's really bad. Now it sounds horrible. They used to say, I would say, well, if I have to figure everything out, what do I need you for? Now, I am not going to say that I said that, but the concept of allowing people, hiring really good people and believing them in them is the thought. Like, my job is to set a vision. I've always been like, I love this whole lighthouse approach, right? You set the vision and then allow people to come up with their own ways to get there. And I think when you do that and you trust them, you just like create an environment where everybody feels like they're winning and they're having fun, and they're personally winning and contributing and having fun, And so that's what I do. I set a vision. I'm going for this lighthouse approach. And then my goal is that everyone on that team understands how they're going to get to that point. And then I'm guiding, I'm trusting, I'm removing obstacles. Like, that's my job, to remove obstacles. And also to help bring people along in the organization so there's belief in the work that we're doing. And when you do that, like, I think it inspires people to show up much, much stronger on an individual basis.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we're caught in an interesting moment in time, because there's a lot of Groundhog's Day going on in people's day-to-day schedules, in the rigor of making sure that the business is there, but our personal lives, because the cat's got to get fed, or the family has graduation, et cetera. So we're all kind of managing that, I think, actively. Do you have any thoughts on just a culture of inspiration? How do you keep the team motivated with regards to setting goals? You said you're hands off, but how do you keep them there in the moment?
I'm sure they would say I'm making that up. I'm not hands off. Let me just say, there's a difference between being hands off and micromanaging. I'm not a micromanager, but I like to know what's going on so I can put my little touch on it. Sorry, I cut you off though.
No, I just wanted to know how you keep the positive energy going. Is everything for you a moonshot with the team, or do you really think about the counter to the moonshots, which is keeping goals attainable and on point and on target? Like, how do you manage those two things?
Yeah, I set really, really tough goals, and I set them for myself personally. And then I ask everyone else to set harder goals for themselves. So I'm going to probably push people beyond the goals that they might have originally set for themselves. And that's only because I truly believe, I believe in the power of people to make amazing and almost impossible things happen. And I've seen it happen. So it's kind of like when people are saying, oh, like they want to play it safe so they can achieve the goal. There's a goal that there's like a reach goal that you're thinking that is the goal, but then if you go like past that, there's another goal, and that's the goal we should be going for. What I found is when you push people and yourself, more importantly, to do something that you even didn't think was possible, it's so motivating. Like they want to do it again and again and again. And then the best thing about it is the organization believes in you more. You get more resources. People are like, oh, how do you get all these resources? Well, I kind of blow my goals out of the water. And then when you do that, you're not viewed as, creative is just about, making really fun, pretty things. You're viewed as a business driver of growth and revenue. And that's what I want for my team. And everyone on my team needs to know how their work, I don't care if you're at the so-called bottom of the org chart, you need to know how your role is connected to driving revenue for the company. And when we do that with our goals, there's only room for going up, for winning with the team.
That's great. Right. Eyes on the prize. We have to be part of moving the company forward in many ways. And I think, focusing on that. So many clients, I think, who are on the call today are either thinking about or in the process of managing an in-house studio. They either want one or they have one. Give us some pros and cons, some advice on the process. Any thoughts at a high level for your peers in the industry on this?
So I would first say, understand why are you launching an in-house agency? I think that right now it's very in vogue, right? Everyone wants an in-house agency. It's a ton of work. And once you sign up for it, you have to deliver magic. And you have to do it again and again and again and again. The value of having external agencies is like, okay, if it's not working, you can move on and do something else. When you're bringing these people in-house, they're not going to do that. It's not forever, but probably forever. So what you have to do is think about, how am I going to make sure that I'm continuing to drive growth through this team? And if you're not very clear on that, I would wait. I would not do it right away. And then two, I would figure out, how do I do that? The other thing is, it's really important that you have your leadership on board. If your leadership is not on board, and I mean like your leadership is really insisting that you do this, then it's just going to be this really painful uphill battle. Our leadership really wanted it. And when they saw all of the results, then it was like, oh, okay, this is working more and more and more. And you've got to save money for the company. If you're not saving money for the company, like, why are you there? So creating the creative magic is huge. And then you've got to absolutely save money for the company. And the last thing is, it's really important who you hire and how you hire people for, and you're not changing out creatives. These are people who are permanent Ts in your company. And so you've got to really focus on hiring the best and people who are, have the drive that you're looking for.
That's such great advice. And I think investing in the long-term goals
Yeah,
of the business, you can never lose sight of that. And I think
absolutely.
the quality of experience and expertise that you bring into the house will have a downstream effect on the quality of output. That's great, great, great advice.
Yeah.
Um, Alia, I mentioned it earlier. You host a podcast. You launched it this year in 2021. As if you have enough on your plate already, 5-star rating. It's called Phenomenal Grit. I bring it up because I was really inspired by it. I think your perspective, the relevance, the fact that it's so relatable and so human at the core of all the conversations that I've listened to. You have a motto: no grit, no pearl. What
Yeah.
does that mean? And just please share more broadly about your podcast as a whole.
So I launched the pod. I always wanted a podcast, and I always wanted to, and I knew I was always going to talk about kind of diversity and women. These are things I'm passionate about. You probably can tell. And so, but I waited like all this time. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it now. But no grit, no pearl is really, I would say, 3 things: resiliency, heart, and giving to others.
Mm.
It's a professional, it's podcast professional. Like, it's about women of color in their profession and how they succeed, the challenges that they go through. And I chose to do it because I was getting so many requests to meet with people and converse with them about their own personal careers. And women, were coming up, and all women, not just women of color, all women. And I couldn't talk to everybody. So this was a means by which I could scale it. I would love to tell you that no grit, no pearl, and that Phenomenal Grit is about like your technical capabilities, but I'm not, because I ultimately believe that technical capabilities can be learned. I truly believe it's about resiliency, your ability to just keep getting up, to not take no for an answer, to come back every time. Your heart, meaning like your true like love for a thing, like the passion has to be there, and then giving back to others. And so for me personally, I'm committed to trying to give back to others. But what I found is that, the more you give back, like the more comes to you. So that to me is really what grit and Phenomenal Grit is about. Phenomenal happens to be like a really awesome word for Black women in particular. Love the word phenomenal because of the Maya Angelou poem. So I put that in there, but grit has been a personal word for me that has really helped me in my career.
That's great. And I
So
mean,
check it out, Phenomenal Grit.
I endorse it. I've listened to about 7 episodes.
Oh, wow,
And,
Arvin. I don't know
yeah,
if I have
no,
enough
I mean,
content to keep up.
like I said, it's just so human and relatable that for me, I got a lot out of every conversation, whether you were hosting others. So I endorse it. I thought it should hold a special place today because it's really, really great.
Thank you.
We've got a question that's come through on the chat and Q&A. A lot of this is focused on purpose-driven marketing. So I'm going to read the question from the chat. Ravina kind of distilled some of the others. When it comes to communicating with your consumers, how do you think about brand purpose? And how does that impact your approach to marketing?
Yeah, I think, the brand purpose is everything. So I think you have to understand, and we have so many different brands. So I manage a ton of different brands. And so you've got to really understand what is the purpose of each brand and how does that brand show up? And it has to be at the center of everything. I think if you don't, there's so many different mediums now that you could easily lose sight of where you're going. The purpose of our brand shows up, I think it has to, in literally everything that we do. And when it doesn't, you have to question, am I doing the right thing? And be willing to pivot.
Yeah, and is purpose-led for McCormick something that is a non-negotiable, or is it something where certain brands have a more intrinsic fit and they're able to lean in more than others? Any thoughts on how?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's purpose in every single brand. It doesn't necessarily have to show up in the same way. So, my the way I'm thinking about McCormick and how we show up in that brand, as opposed to the way I'm thinking about Stubbs and how we show up in this brand, it's going to be completely different. But at the same time, like, one might be about like the family, right? And one might be more about bringing people together through like flavor, like, or both. So I think I think every brand has, I mean, I'm wondering if the question is more about purpose.
Yeah, you know, some of the questions are, how do you promote authenticity with your purpose-driven marketing strategy? When it comes to communicating, how do you think about it? What are the biggest challenges you face in your career implementing a purpose-led program? Those are
I don't separate purpose from your true like brand identity and what how that brand is showing up. I think that they have to go together. And I think that the reason why a lot of brands struggled this year is because those two things are not aligned. So it's like purpose is somehow sitting out somewhere else, then you're really going to have a struggle with it. You know, I'll give you an example because I'm not 100% sure where they're going with this question, but I'm thinking it's more, you know, if we think about how we're showing up, like we did a lot this year to help people with food insecurity. That makes sense for McCormick because we are a food and flavor brand. I do think who we are as a brand shows up in those more purpose-driven activities, but I don't see them as separate. And I think that your brand, it has to feel natural. People say authenticity. Well, where does your brand connect with you know, the purpose and people's kind of human struggle? And you know, food insecurity is huge, and we've always been in that space. Like McCormick has always played there. Maybe we haven't always talked about it, but we've always, you know, been in that space. And I think we've, you know, now maybe is a more important time to elevate it. And we've done some things this year where we brought in you know, giving back into some of our consumer activations, which in the past I had been very, very separate, right? But now when we're doing a Tacos Together event with Drew Barrymore, which is, you know, all kind of a very consumer activation, we're still giving, you know, $1 million in food insecurity to, you know, people who are affected by COVID. And so there's ways to align these things very, very naturally. I think the problem is sometimes it's not so natural. Mm-hmm.
Well, Alia, we are at time for our session today. I can't thank you enough. It's been just fantastic working with you through this process, and we appreciate all your wisdom on display today. So with that, we will wrap our session. And once again, thank you, Brand Innovators, and heartfelt thanks to you, Alia, for participating today. Thanks all.
Thank you, Arvin. Thanks, Brand Innovators. Take care.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to both of you. I just want to say before you guys head out, Alia, I love the lighthouse metaphor. It's very cool. I've heard lots of different ways to describe it, but never heard it quite the same way. And it makes